Welcome, welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I am your host, Megan. And typically I say my amazing co-host is, and I let my co-host introduce herself. But first I must introduce my local co-host here because I have Waffle sitting here beside me for our podcast today. Typically she doesn't join us. Sometimes you hear a bark in the background, but that's about it. But my human co-host is...
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Welcome. So we are your source for messy, imperfect homeschooling advice. If you are tired of super shiny influencers who convince you that homeschooling is all unicorns and rainbows all day, every day, join the freaking club.
Yeah, right. But don't misunderstand. We love homeschooling and we love being with our respective kids. But we do think that it is so important to portray an accurate picture of homeschooling. If you're considering jumping in, you'll know what to expect, right? And if you're already in the thick of it and you have an occasional rough day or you're feeling tired, we think it is super, super important for you to know that it isn't you. It just is.
Yeah, that's it, right? If you're having those days, you're not doing it wrong. It isn't like everyone else totally has their shit together and you're the one who's just missing the ship. The influencers just aren't showing you that side of their lives. But here we are unfiltered, so you will get a complete picture from us.
Yeah, exactly. So, one of the other things that you can expect from us is a completely secular environment and progressive. We are watching in horror as democracy crumbles in the United States. And as an unschooler for Megan and an aggressive academic homeschooler for me, we don't always see eye to eye, but we do not mess around with human rights. Those are just never up for negotiation here.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're showing up to your local homeschool groups and people are spouting off garbage like all lives matter, or my favorite, love the sinner, hate the sin, gags, and you're sitting there and you're sitting there just thinking like, these are so not my people, then welcome. We are your people and we're so glad you found us.
Yep.
So today we'll be talking about homeschooling while working. Homeschooling is the largest growing education segment in the United States. And it isn't like tons of parents are slimming down to one income to make it happen, especially not with the economy in a complete free fall right now. So we see tons of people asking in Facebook groups, can you homeschool and work? And like most things, the answer is quite nuanced. Wouldn't it be great if we were just like, yes, of course, but
Yeah, totally you can. It's my favorite word, maybe.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
lot to
right.
it, maybe. Yep.
Yeah, we'll get there, right? So, but
Mhm.
before we dig into all of that, as part of our keeping it real efforts here, we like to start with a recap of our weeks. So, how's your week been, Amanda?
My week is good. So if you've been following along, you've been on this journey with me of trying to get back to like my baseline before I went on our big Europe adventure. And I'm finally back at baseline. I'm finally back to where I was health wise before Christmas. And it's, mid April. So I'm thankful to be here. That does not change the fact that I still have chronic fatigue syndrome, right? And so lots of things wear me out and I'm falling asleep early and things like that. But I'm just much happier with life right now. It feels really good to be back to my pre-adventure normal. So yeah, like that's my big thing. I'm done with HOA stuff and we've taken a step back with some of the things that were taking up a bunch of our time here with the podcast stuff, and we're trying to retool and use our time a little bit more wisely. And so I'm feeling really good about that because I'm not quite as exhausted and overwhelmed with the stuff that was happening there. And so, yeah, I'm riding a little bit of a high. I'm not going to lie. And I don't know, my whole family could be like falling apart around me right now. And I'd just be like, I'm okay. Things are a lot better in my world.
Things are great.
Great. Everything's great. Like, what? Yeah. Yeah. So, how about you? Things have not been going quite so smoothly in your world.
Yeah, well, first of all, I've already lost my furry co-host buddy. She's already laid her head down and was like, "I'm done here." So she's snuggling though, so that's providing some sort of effort towards the podcast. I mean, we've had an awesome week. So we're at a world schooling hub, which is super awesome. There's a bunch of kids here that my kids know and that they're friends with and that they chat with on WhatsApp throughout, off times in between hubs and stuff like that. So that's awesome. Our home base is in Lisbon and we have come to Vienna for the hub. So that's been super fun. The kids have been at I mean, they're kids, they're teenagers, right? So like they go off and do their thing. Like tonight, my daughter went off and did game club at one of the board game cafes, and they go off here and go off there and hang out with people. So that's been awesome. The downside has been that the Wi-Fi at our very budget hotel is not amazing. Amanda and I talk about the fact that we talk about our world schooling adventures and we're like, it's never quite as glamorous as you think it's going to be, or we haven't spent nearly as much money as you think we have. It's Easter week and accommodations were nuts during Easter week here in Vienna because the kids are off school, and I hear like all the museums are free and stuff like that, and the transportation is free for school age kids. So we stayed at this place and the staff is absolutely amazing. They're so sweet, but the Wi-Fi sucks. And so we are recording right now at 2:30 in the morning for me. People might be like, couldn't Amanda have like shifted? So she did. No. This is all me, right? Like, I can only record in the common area because the Wi-Fi is not strong enough to do anything in my room. And the common area is loud because the hotel is at 100% occupancy for Easter. So this is basically the only time that we could find, and I had to use my noise canceling headset that I usually use to teach with because I'm in the common area. So chances are somebody's going to come in here and make a cup of tea while we're podcasting. So, but other than that, it's good. We're going to be traveling for the next month because we're doing 2 hubs that are back to back. So that's good. The next one has the prom. So my daughter's like super excited. Outfit has been selected. So it's a whole thing. But yeah, other than that, it's been great. I mean, we know we're reliant on Wi-Fi in today's world, right? But then you realize like how reliant on the Wi-Fi you are when the Wi-Fi is not good. So that's the
Well,
week I've had.
yeah, and the reality is, especially if you're doing any kind of world schooling, you are trying to work and doing a whole bunch of things that are work related, whether that's recording a specific podcast or teaching classes or grading things or, even just calls and things like that that you have to do for work. And when your Wi-Fi isn't working, all of those cool free video conferencing apps aren't working either. So
Yeah.
it can be really challenging.
Yeah. So we were actually supposed to be here another full week to hang out and explore Vienna. And we are leaving tomorrow. So the hotel was nice enough to, I mean, they've just been so wonderful. And they were like, don't worry, so they refunded me and we have found someplace else. And I've already messaged them ahead of time to talk to them about their Wi-Fi situation, which when we stay in an Airbnb, I do. I message the host in advance and I say, what can I expect as far as speeds are concerned? But in a hotel, I don't typically do that. We're in Vienna. This is like a major European city. Like I wouldn't have thought that I had to email a week in advance and say like, do you have decent Wi-Fi? But lesson learned.
Yep, for
Yeah.
sure.
So, but I'm pumped for our topic today and it'll be good. I took a nap. So even though it's 2:30 in the morning, I'm good.
Yeah. And we'll see how many hours we can keep you good. So
Yeah.
all right. So let's go ahead and jump in. We're talking working and homeschooling. I think before we can really dig in, we do have to acknowledge that there's a wide range of what work is or is defined as. And so we're not talking about like, being at home parent, talking about like an actual work situation where you're pulling a paycheck. Okay, so we'll get that out there. And there's lots of other things. We talk about all the other different kinds of situations and balancing things and all of that in other podcasts. But this one is specifically about when you bring home a paycheck. And so are we talking about fully remote with a flexible schedule, fully remote, not flexible, shift work outside of the home, shift work with overtime, regular 9 to 5 jobs, the type of work, the amount of flexibility, the age of your kids, and probably even more will come up and come into play when you're weighing whether or not homeschooling is possible for you and your family specifically while working.
Also, before we go any further, we'd like to share that we recently recorded an episode about homeschooling and privilege. And we see really pretty images with quotes that float around on social media that say homeschooling isn't a privilege because people sacrifice to homeschool, right? It's this like, we drive older cars or we buy clothes secondhand and all of that. And we're like, yeah, but sacrifice and privilege aren't mutually exclusive of one another. And anyone implying that has a super limited view of what privilege is for sure. So when we're talking about this, if you're like, well, yeah, that would be great if I could do that, we understand. If you're curious about unpacking all of what goes with that, feel free to check that out. It's just a few episodes back in our queue. It's not that far back. So as Amanda said, we're going to kind of dive into different scenarios, right? So let's start off with envisioning a caregiver who works remotely, but with fixed hours, right? So 9 to 5, Zoom meetings, can't be disturbed, and what homeschooling would look like in that scenario. So and we talked about in the privilege episode, right? That people are like, well, homeschooling doesn't have to happen during, 8 to 3 or, whatever is the case. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true. But there's a lot of factors that come into whether or not that's the case. I mean, if you have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old and you're on a fixed 9 to 5 and you can't be disturbed and there's no adults home, it gets a little bit tricky. And we totally acknowledge that, right? So, depending on the age of your kids, you might try something like early morning homeschooling, evening homeschooling, independent learning blocks where the kids kind of know what needs to be done during different time slots of the day, trying to kind of school in shifts where you're squeaking things in between meetings and getting touch points in and all of that. So can it be possible? Yeah, right. But there's definitely some nuance to that.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's a perfect example, right? We've talked about it before, but if you're just picking up this episode because you're like thinking about wanting to do this, right? Keep in mind that especially for younger kiddos, early elementary age students, they really have the attention span equal to their age, maybe a couple of minutes more. So if you've got a 6-year-old, you could easily do a few things before you kind of get started for the day, or you could take your 15-minute breaks and, get a little bit of homeschooling in here or there. You do not have to spend more than an hour and a half max kind of doing your school around your work stuff. So in theory, it is possible. The reality is, what are you going to do with your younger kids when they need supervision in this scenario, right? And that's hard. Some people do have support, in some families, you have two people who are working with super flexible schedules, or you work opposite shifts, or one person is a stay at home parent, or one person is perhaps disabled and able to take on more of that time, like in our home. That might look a lot of different ways. It might also involve a lot more screen time than you imagined. For better or worse, there's a lot of guilt around screen time in these scenarios. You know, Only you can know what works in your family, only you can know what's right. And we're not going to sit here and judge you. We try really hard to make sure that's not happening in this kind of supportive environment we're working to build. Sometimes you have to do that. And there are plenty of shows out there. There are loads and loads of shows. If you're like, oh, get all of Animal Planet, get all of the Disney, they have all those animal documentary shows, or let your kids binge Odd Squad. It talks about math and word world. And I mean, there are lots of things where if you're like, oh, I don't want them there's lots of educational programming out there right now. And PBS isn't gone yet. So, dive in.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think too, all of that's possible, right? But then there's also the reality that if you're squeezing in schooling between these little breaks that you have and you're checking on your kids and making sure they're okay and putting out fires in between your meetings and stuff like that, you have now lost your break, right?
Yep.
So the break that you had from work where you could kind of regroup your thoughts and all of that. So it takes a toll. And a lot of people are willing to do that. It doesn't make it easy, right? If you're not willing or able to do that, no one's judging you for that, but it's something to be aware of that your time has now been sliced into one additional tiny slice of pie that any sort of break might have really just gotten eaten up. So it's just something to be aware of before you dive in.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, actually, in the episode later this week, we're going to talk about some self care stuff. And that totally falls into this, right? Whether you can do it or not, whether it's good for you or not, only you know that, right? Only you can make that decision for you and your family. And that's important. And there's some other options, right? We're gonna keep talking, and you might find some other things that we talk about throughout the episode that you're like, oh, I could use that, or I could implement that a bit, right? So if we're thinking about different scenarios, we could also look at a case where you've got the caregiver who has flexibility, right? Maybe something like a gig worker or a freelancer, or even a lot of times entrepreneurs who have a lot more flexibility in when they're scheduling things and what that looks like. But they're still working, right? So there are definitely some pitfalls with everyone thinking you have loads of flexibility that we don't always talk about, right? And that's the fact that like you still do have to be on important calls that can't be interrupted. You don't want to be that guy that was on what like BBC or whatever it was during the pandemic whose kids busted up in and he wanted to like crawl on his desk, right? Like we all felt that. And I think because of the pandemic, I think almost every family had that experience at least once. So it's not quite as, mortifying, I feel like, as it was pre-pandemic. Like it's been normalized a little bit more, but it's still a struggle. I think it's a struggle for everyone who is working from home and has kiddos at home.
Hmm. Well, and I think too, flexibility is great, but on the flip side, it's also code for like constant juggling,
Mhm.
right? Where it's like playing schedule Tetris all the time,
Yeah.
where I'm like, okay, today I need to get the unit study finalized for the month of May. Okay, no problem, right? So in my head, I'm like, okay, I teach at 2 and 7. So I'll do the unit study at 4 o'clock because I'll be free then. And then I can lead into my class, right? Or whatever. And then one of the kids comes down and is like, oh, I have such and such, and it was supposed to be at this time, but they just texted and asked if I could come early. Can I have a ride? And it's like, okay, sure. So I'll give you a ride so that I'll do the unit study after I teach at such and such a time, right? And so you're constantly like scheduling Tetris and it's a lot, right? So, that ability to schedule and plan and shift on the fly and all of that. And so it's possible, but again, mental toll, exhaustion. It's not to say we're not sitting here being like, don't homeschool if you have to, if you're freelancing or you have contract work. We just want to give you a clear picture of what it is. I mean, this is what Amanda and I do, right? So we totally get this one. It's absolutely doable. It's totally doable. But yeah, I mean, sometimes we're like, I'm burnt out. Like sometimes we just have too many things that snowball and are due all at the same time, and it's a lot. So just being aware that that's the way it goes sometimes.
Well, yeah, no, it is. And, full disclosure in our working partnership, I have it set up where for the most part, I spend the weekends in bed because we've talked a lot on the show, right? But I have a disability. I have a very limited amount of energy and effort that I can put towards things. And if I'm putting that in during the week with working and volunteering and homeschooling, and parenting and all of those things, I need the weekend to really recover. And I'm in a partnership with someone who is happy to take over on the weekend and, you know, take care of the meals and do all of the driving and run all of the errands and do those things on the weekend. If I didn't have that partnership, I'm not sure we could balance things as well as we do. And not everyone has that, whether you're in a relationship where you just don't have that kind of partnership, or you're single parenting, or you are a single person caring for, your grandchildren's or your niece or your nephew, whatever that might be. I think the other thing too is you have the reality of if you say you're a gig worker and you have loads of flexibility, but sometimes you do just have to be out of the house and you're the primary caregiver for the younger children who can't be home alone, you might need to be looking at regular part time care. I know that's definitely something that we did when my kiddo was younger. It was partly for self care and partly so I could take care of things that I needed to get done. But I had, one day a week, one afternoon where someone came in for 3 hours. And that way I knew for sure every week I have this 3 hour block of time that I can do any of the important things where I cannot be interrupted. And so it has to be scheduled on Wednesday between this time and this time because that's when I know I've paid someone to come in and take that place for me. And not everyone can afford to do that, but if that's something that you can do or you can find a way to do it, it can definitely help to know that in the middle of this schedule Tetris, you have this 1 or 2 blocks of time each week that are for sure time that you can schedule those important phone calls or you can schedule those in-person meetings that have to be done.
For sure. And we're completely aware of the privilege that's wrapped up in being able to hire somebody to bring somebody in. We totally get that. And we'll talk a little bit more about maybe swapping with another parent and creating a buddy system or something like that, which again, There's mental load associated with that. We completely understand. But if you're looking for a way to make it work, it might be the way for you. Okay, so let's talk about people who work outside of the home because there are plenty of jobs that you can't bring into the home, right? There's yeah, plenty of jobs that just don't work when you try to do them on Zoom. So, really, I feel like we need to break that down into two age groups: kids that are able to stay home alone, that are able to self manage, and kids that aren't. So, let's start with the ones that aren't because that's where it gets a little bit trickier. So, possible options, Amanda talked about part time caregivers. That might be an option. Homeschool pods. Maybe there's other parents in your area that are looking to do the same thing that are like, we're stuck too because I work on Mondays and Thursdays. And you're like, well, I work Friday, Saturday, Sunday because I'm in hospitality or whatever. Okay, great. Maybe there's a way that you can swap those things off. So that might be an option. Same thing with like nanny share. If there's other working parents who are looking for something, maybe you can hire somebody to do in home care for 2 or 3 kids that are one's yours, one's somebody else's, and you're splitting the cost of that person that's
Yeah.
coming in to help. So
Yeah.
that's
Nanny shares are like super popular in the cities, especially I feel like if you're in a city, for sure find your local moms group for kind of your neighborhood. I know where I live, there's a citywide thing that literally is like swapping nannies and nanny shares, and like trying to help with that situation because it's expensive. It's expensive to live here in the best of circumstances and for the vast majority of us. So if you need something like that, right, a way to split those costs can be helpful.
Mhm.
Thing that I was kind of thinking of that I just heard about recently is there is a move in some areas and communities towards these kind of nature schools that aren't school, but it's really more like kind of down the middle with the idea that for the most part, the families are actually going to homeschool at home, but the kids kind of get together and it's not exactly daycare because it's for older kiddos, but it's also not really school. And it kind of rides that line. But because it's not actually school, they can be more affordable. Obviously, they don't have to be more affordable. And I'm sure there are options out there that are stupidly expensive. But it might be worth looking into and seeing if there's one in your area.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I know where we live, most of the places that I've homeschooled also have like a drop off PE day. Unfortunately, most of the time they're religious. I don't know why kickball needs to have God in it, but like apparently that's a thing. If you do have some flexibility, you could always try to work with those a little bit if possible, but again, it can be tough. Not to sound like JD Vance, but maybe a grandparent could be helpful. So ironically, when my kids were small, my parents lived around the corner and they were like, "We're not watching your kids. Like we have our own life." My parents would help on an occasion if a kid woke up sick and I needed like emergency coverage or something, but full-time nannying was not my mom's gig. She was like, "They're your kids, that's not my job." And I'm like, "Oh, man." So maybe you have an aunt, a grandparent, somebody that can help out a little bit, but again, that's not going to be a situation that everybody can lean into. So the privilege gap is definitely real when we talk about this stuff and the ability to make it happen. So sometimes it's a matter of getting creative. I was thinking, Amanda, when you were talking about the forest schools, not really school, but like the forest
Yeah.
cluster of children, right? Kids hanging out together in the woods, whatever we're calling that.
Yeah.
When I was working back in the day in the office during the recession in '08, '09, during that period, there was a whole group of parents. And I worked with this guy, and he needed 1 week off in the summer because that was his week. And so there were about 8 families that pooled their kids. None of them could afford summer camp because of the recession, and people had lost jobs and lost savings and all that kind of stuff. And so out of the families, each parent took 1 week of vacation off work and they covered the summer that way. And so they would have this huge cluster of kids that were swimming in the pool or down at the river or whatever for that week that was their week. It reminded me of during the Great Depression when all the kids would share one birthday cake for the entire month of April or whatever it was. But it's like you get creative and sometimes you're able to figure something out.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's totally true. And there are options, even if it's something as low cost as finding a local co-op play group that works for you, and then coordinating with another mom that takes her kids there so that you go every other week, or even if it's not as set as every other week, you kind of develop a system where it's like, hey, I have this thing I've got to do. I need to get some work done. Would you mind taking the kids? Or if I drop them off, will you watch them? And I'll work from my hotspot in the car in the parking lot if anything comes up. And I think not always, not everyone, but for the most part in the homeschooling community, people want to be helpful and they want you to be successful. So just making those connections and then being willing to kind of share where you're at and ask, as long as you're not the jerk that's always taking and never giving, we're going to be pretty open to it.
I mean, we have that even here. There's a single mom and her daughter who come to these hubs that we do. And like the first day I saw her kid there and she was nowhere to be found. And I'm like, oh, she's at work, right? She's working back at the hotel or whatever. And the kiddo had another adult who was her designated adult in case she needed somebody. So she was safe. But yeah, everybody's kind of like, I can cover her. I know I've offered. I've been like, hey, if you ever need some coverage, I'm more than happy to cover her. So let us know. So yeah, for the most part, most people are very helpful and very content to chip in and help where they can.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we have some others to talk about. But real quickly, I just wanted to say, did you know that we do coaching? So we do one-on-one and two-on-one coaching for anything that you might have questions about, whether you're listening to us and thinking, I definitely think I could do this, but I'm going to fall somewhere in the middle between Megan and Amanda, and I'm not really sure how to get started, and I'm a little overwhelmed. Like, come book a session with us. We can both work with you and help you find exactly what works in your specific situation. If you're listening to us and you're thinking, like, I'm good with this stuff, but like, I have a high schooler and I have no freaking idea how to do a transcript. Megan totally rocks that stuff. Go book with her. She can absolutely 100% help you with that. If you want to talk curriculum, if you want to nerd out with me on specific curriculum at, different levels and different things and talk the pros and cons of stuff because you've looked at all of the reviews online and you're still not entirely sure which one to use. And Kathy Duffy was not helpful. You can book with me. We can totally do that. We have a Calendly. You can find it here in the show notes. You can find it on our website, which is very unoriginally homeschoolmomsunfiltered.com. You can find it lots of places. But yeah, it's a great opportunity to be able to like just really do the things that are specifically you and your family.
Hmm. Absolutely. We had a great coaching session the other day. And I love doing those. I always leave like super jazzed after our coaching sessions because we get so many ideas going and people leave it energized. And I'm like, man, this is great. Right. So
That's it.
pretty
It's
awesome.
it's hard to stop, right? When you're going and the flow is going and everyone's coming up with great ideas and it's like, "Oh, well, what about this?" And, "Oh, no, okay, like, well, if you tweaked it like this, and do you think that?" Like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I know we've never ended a single one on time. So very true. Hard to stop. Sorry. So
That's
yeah.
it. Don't give yourself a hard stop if you're meeting with us. It might not work out.
Exactly. All right. So homeschooling and working. All right. Let's go to a scenario where things twist a little bit, where you are working outside the home, but kids are old enough to stay home alone. How does that shift things?
And I think that this is becoming more and more common. We see a lot of people coming to us talking about how they're pulling middle schoolers and high schoolers out of school and wanting to do this. And it might be a little hard the very first time you pull them out of school and you want to do it because it's a totally different world. It's like the kid who goes off to college and is kind of floundering because they went from being at home in high school to like college. I mean, come on. That's a freedom that we all love, right? So I realistically, you're going to have to do some scaffolding up to this point, whether you were already homeschooling younger kiddos and you've been building on that and working it into your family routine, or you're bringing kids home and you're going to actively work on building some scaffolding into what that looks like for them to be staying home alone and how they're going to manage their time and what they're going to do to make sure that they do silly things like eat and know how to call you if there's a problem or who they open the door to or those kinds of things because if they haven't been home during the day on their own, those those are things we think like, well, yeah, obviously they know, but they don't know because we have to explicitly teach some of those things.
Mm-hmm. No, we have that. I don't even think I told you, but I had that maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where my youngest was home alone, and we live in an apartment with a buzzer door. So if you're making it up to my floor, you got through the first door. So good on you. But he called me and he says, there's firemen at the door. Right. And so, of course, my brain went to like every con artist video there ever were. Like, are they really firemen? I was like, oh my gosh, it's that scenario of what do you do in this case? But I was like, look out the window and see if you see fire. And there were fire trucks like all over the street. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, they're wearing uniforms. They have badges. I was like, okay. So I was like, fine, you may open the door. And it turned out there was something wrong in like the building next to like the building that touches ours, but not ours. And they were checking. I don't know what they were doing. But anyway, but yeah, totally to your point. He was like, SOS. I don't know what to do in this situation.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, that was something that we even did in that coaching session that we had the other day, right? It was a working parent and it was like, how do I give them a checklist and get them to get this stuff done without me having to triple check that it really got done and without feeling like they're being nagged and all that kind of stuff. And we, if I do say so myself, we came up with some great solutions. So it's definitely possible in that world, right? So yeah, a lot of that is going to look like building independence, you being able to assign work and set expectations, checklists, timers. Amanda's a big Alexa fan. I'm a huge smartwatch fan. To be able to kind of get those things built in there without you being the nag, which feels really good because that doesn't do any wonders for anyone's relationship with their child. Um, but kind of giving the kid that autonomy. And you know what? In my mind, that's a great thing for them to have. Like you mentioned, college. We read a book, not for the podcast a while back, but it was written by this person who was a dean at Stanford University, who was talking about how wildly unprepared these college kids are coming in. Because in the traditional education world, a lot of parents, their sole focus for their kids was getting into a good school. And so to do that was just grades, 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 volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. And so in order for kids to build this resume that got them into Stanford, they had removed all of the obstacles that this kid might face so that they could focus on the goal. And then when they got to school, they had no idea how to handle an obstacle because they had never encountered one. And so the reality is when you're doing this and the kids are expected to get things done at a certain time and have things done and self-manage and regulate their time, these are amazing life skills that kids in traditional school environments aren't always getting. So it's a good thing, right? It's a little bit of work to put into place, but it's a good thing long term.
Yeah, that's it, right? Unfortunately, the good things do take a little bit more work setting them up, working on them. Yeah, definitely a good thing. All right. So we've covered some good ones, but let's be real. There is often one parent who does the bulk of the homeschool work. Okay. That's yeah, exactly. Wait, you're talking to the two moms that do in our world. It's not always moms. It's not always divided the way it is in our home. But the reality is a lot of times there's one caregiver who is doing the vast majority of the homeschool stuff. So what's the cost to that? It goes above and beyond being a stay-at-home parent. A lot of people think, "Oh, well, it's you were a stay-at-home parent before, so it's not that big of a deal to go into homeschooling." But now you are the parent, the teacher, hopefully the partner, right? How do you do all of those things every day and keep each of those relationships healthy? It takes a lot. It's a huge emotional, mental toll.
Yeah, it is. Right. I have really nothing to add to that except to be like,
No, no.
yeah,
So easy.
yeah,
We're rocking it. It's so easy.
right. And it's tough because how many times do we hear from people who their partner isn't entirely on board with homeschooling too? So then if you're like, man, I'm exhausted or this week's been really rough, and it's like, well, you wanted to do this. So that doesn't make it any easier if you're in one of those situations as well.
Yeah.
So it can be challenging. So it really becomes like, how do you then make space for your own needs? How do you draw a line between being the parent, being the teacher, being a partner? It requires redefining a lot of things. And finding time for yourself can become challenging. As Amanda said, we're going to talk about that more in our book club episode this week, because that's coming up in this week's reading. But Yeah, it does. It takes some effort to kind of break all that down. For me, the line between teacher and parent isn't really a thing because we unschool. So my role is more mentorship and steering and guidance and support. I'm never sitting down with my kid and being like, so here's how fractions work. That's not how we've done things. We outsource anything that the kids want to learn that I wouldn't know how to teach them or wouldn't feel confident teaching. Sorry. A yawn snuck in. It's 3:15 in the morning now. So, I'm doing pretty good, but that one stuck in. So yeah, I don't really have that so much. What do you do with the line between parents and teachers since you actually do more traditional stuff?
Well, I think the biggest thing for us was you kind of mentioned it before, but was just start using for us, we used a smart device, right? So we used an Alexa that helped keep the schedule so that it wasn't me nagging about the schedule and me nagging about getting to a class or things like that. And so that helped make Alexa the bad guy in a lot of ways. And then another thing that we recently implemented, and I think your kiddos need to be a little bit older for this to work well, but we basically implemented office hours, like high school or college level, like if you need mom is available to help with homeschool stuff from this time to this time. And after that, you need to wait until tomorrow when I'm back in the office. And so it made it possible for me to be able to make that switch between, okay, I'm here, I'm I'm homeschooling, I'm doing this, and then I need to do these other things. And also I can turn off and approach him as the mom, as the friend, the caregiver, the support that way. Not to say that I'm not supportive during homeschooling, but it's definitely different. I mean, it's a little bit of a different approach when you're like, okay, well, I really need you to finish up this thing so we can move on to the next thing. Or I really like you have to do this worksheet because the teach, I have to submit it for this thing or whatever that case may be, versus the mom who wants to just be like, yeah, let's go to the park. Like we can't always just go to the park just because I want to. Uh, so yeah, for us, that's how we manage that difference between a more well that comes up with an academic aggressive homeschool style.
Yeah, and that's always been one of the things that I find super exhausting about unschooling is, which I love and I wouldn't trade it for the world, but it's 24/7, right?
Mhm.
When it's like, I've got this idea. I mean, I came downstairs to podcast at 2 a.m. with you this morning, and one of my kids was already down here using the good internet, the best internet available, for a meeting that's taking place in Georgia that she wanted to go to. And I was like, okay, great. And it's like, it's literally 24/7 with my kids where they're signing up for stuff around the world at various times or meeting up with people in wacky time zones. And they don't need me to help them like log in at this point and stuff like that. But you're just managing it, right? It's all in your peripheral vision all the time.
Mhm.
And it's a little tiring. But yeah, stuff. That's the way it works. Yeah. So, I mean, having a supportive partnership or community would be really good in those instances. Partnership would be ideal because if you have a partner, if you don't, then come hang, we'll support you. But if you have a partner, getting them on board is huge. Amanda and I have both talked about the fact that neither one of our husbands are going to sit down and read a homeschool book or listen to, the 100+ episodes of homeschooling podcasts that we've put out. But Amanda kind of pebbles her husband like a penguin, like, look at this information. Look at this information. We're basically homeschooling our husbands, right? We're like strewing and leaving things for them to find and learn.
I
And
can say
and
that
the
only because he'll never listen to this podcast, so he's not gonna figure it out.
right, right. So there's the benefit. Some other husband just got sent like this exact spot and is like, that's what you've been doing, right? So yeah, trying to like educate them and bring them up to speed. Cause a lot of times what we find is the primary parent who's homeschooling has done all this research and is in all the Facebook groups and all that. And so they're gaining confidence and they're gaining knowledge and they're gaining assurance. And the other person is like, what the hell are we doing? This is never going to work.
Yeah.
So bringing them up to speed a little bit, always a good thing. And finding external community, right? Whether that's local to you. I mean, we host a Patreon community where we have live meetings and we have chats and all kinds of stuff. So there's support in all forms and in all places, but building that support structure becomes really helpful when you're talking about the emotional, the mental, and the physical load of trying to carry all of the things that you're trying to carry if you're working, homeschooling, parenting, whatever else you have on your plate, it's a lot. So definitely support becomes really helpful in that spot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say too, don't, I mean, a homeschool support is great. It is really important. And if you can find a local community or a Facebook group, or you come and meet your people in our Patreon group, whatever that might look like, that is really useful. But don't assume that it has to be homeschool people. I know one of my biggest supporters, and every time we get together, she'll bring something up, and I'm like, "Are you sure you don't want to homeschool?" And she's like, "Nope, rather shoot myself in the foot." She's like, "You can homeschool him, but I'm not homeschooling him." But it doesn't change the fact that she's one of my closest friends and one of my biggest supporters. And when I just really need to vent about something, or I need to call someone and say, I can't, I can't today. I can't. And my partner isn't here to pick up the pieces, or he's busy all day, or he's in the office today. Like, she's the one that's like, "Can I take him for a hike for you?" And I'm like, "Yes, please. Yes, please." You know,
Like his shoes are already on. I was hoping you'd ask.
his backpack has water. He's good to go. So just keep in mind that your community and your support can come from a lot of different places. It doesn't have to just be homeschoolers that are progressive, secular, like-minded.
That's a good point. Yeah. Okay. So you're working, you're homeschooling. I think, interestingly enough, following the pandemic, whether you're working or not, the default has been like, I think I'm going to homeschool. I need an online program, right? Have you
Yeah.
felt that, Amanda, where it's like instantly this like go directly from point A to point B is homeschooling equals online program? And we're like, like maybe, but like that's not the only option that exists out there.
Well, but I do think that that happened because nearly every community or nearly every school district, right, they rolled out a virtual program. And I mean, it wasn't necessarily good. And the vast majority of teachers working on that program hadn't actually studied that. So I would like, we have a lot to say about online school, but I will say that there are people who get their credentials, their teaching credentials, their degrees in teaching virtual school. And it's a very different ballgame. If you are going to look at doing any sort of online program, make sure that you're actually checking that the people who are teaching there actually learned how to teach there, because classroom management is not the same virtually as in an in-person brick and mortar class. There's just a lot of differences. And a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, if it's Los Angeles Unified School District or whatever your school district is, and they put together a virtual program, they have moved teachers that needed a job or, hired XYZ, but not necessarily focused on actual virtual learning and qualified teachers. So definitely keep that in mind if you're going to start looking at something like that.
Yeah. And we're not anti online school by any stretch. It has its place. To Amanda's point, making sure that you're vetting programs. If you need help vetting programs, come talk to us. But not all online programs are created equally. I mean, I think the default in a lot of groups that I see is like the K-12, the Discovery K-12, the K-12. And of all the programs that are out there, that would be like my least, right? I'd be like, oh, because
Right
it's
after the local school version, virtual.
right. Okay. I live in the Southeast, Amanda. I don't even think our local school districts have that out. In Florida, we do. In Florida, there's
I know Florida
FLVS.
has it. Yeah.
Yeah. But in South Carolina, I don't even think that option existed. They barely had school in person. So, right, it was pretty bad there. So that's why my brain didn't go there. But some of the ones that are out there that are like Connections Academy and K-12 and all that, they are beyond time consuming and beyond rigid. They don't offer any of the benefits of homeschooling. So there's, in my mind, a lot better programs that are out there that are still online that offer flexibility, that don't take up like 6 hours of your child's day, that don't make
Every
their
day.
minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That aren't so like mind numbingly long and boring that they're like dead on their feet by the end of the day. So yeah, without a doubt. In my mind, if you are going to use an online school option because you're working and you need that support, Awesome. No problem. There are some really cool programs that are out there, depending on what your kiddos' needs are and their age and all that kind of stuff. In an ideal world, I think you would also mix in some other stuff as well, right? That you're doing with that kiddo to get your full education online. In my opinion, just isn't going to foster that extreme love of learning that you're likely trying to achieve. We want passionate learners. We want sparked kids. We want interested kids. And when you're sitting at a computer, like watching a video and answering a couple of questions, that's going to be less so. If you're taking some live classes with a teacher you really love, you'll probably have a little bit more of that. But I think you still want to mix in some stuff that's hands-on, that's engaging, especially in the younger years, and try to build that a little bit where maybe you're doing some things at night or on the weekends or something like that would be an ideal scenario. If you are barely keeping your head above water and your kid is being bullied at school and you need them to be home and safe, and the best you can do right now is put them in front of a computer and sign them up for IXL, Khan Academy, Funcation, do it. Do it, right? We're not judging you. Maybe over time you could work towards something a little bit more hybrid. But in an ideal world, that's where I would aim.
Yeah. No, I would definitely agree with that. There are lots of options out there, and it doesn't have to be a full day. I mean, just think about it. You're grown up. We're all grown-ups listening to this. When was the last time you had to do like an all-day conference or webinar
Oh,
or something and you were like so over it by the end of the day, even if it was something you were really interested in listening to? Like, who wants to do that day in and day out, day after day after day? It's hard to be interested and excited, even if it's something that you were interested and excited in to begin with, right? So just keep that in mind when you're picking what you're going to do with your kid.
mhm.
Okay. So let's talk about something that we see a lot when people are trying to make homeschooling work and working from home work. There's the hunt for remote jobs. I don't think that we could have this conversation without acknowledging how incredibly overwhelming and predatory the online job market can be. There are so many scams out there. The promise of easy money or make $5,000 a month in your spare time. And the thing is, it's understandable why people are drawn in, but I like it is very rare for these things to be legit or sustainable, right? I mean, even in my local group, I just saw a mom who was posting, like, I'm thinking about becoming a content creator because I do this, like, tell me about it. And there was someone in there who was like, oh, I manage content creators and you can make really good money, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I mean, there are some content creators who make really good money, but none of my favorite content creators only create content. They all have full-time jobs doing other things, like if that's not an indication of the fact that you don't make great long-term sustainable money as a content creator, I don't know what is. You just have to be like so careful.
I feel like that's the adult version of every kid that wants to be a YouTuber. I mean, how many kids they're like, well, my kid just wants to be a YouTuber. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Do you know how many YouTubers are actually successful and make money compared to the ones who attempt it? And content creation, unfortunately, is kind of the same thing. I mean, it can be very hard.
If it's a passion project, by all means, go for it. And if you make some side money, that's awesome. Hello, talk to us. Make a little bit of side money, fantastic, but you're not going to get rich by any stretch of the imagination. And if you're going in it thinking that like this is going to become your full-time job and it will sustain you indefinitely, like you're probably just setting yourself up for a lot of frustration.
Mhm. Yeah, totally agree. I mean, there are reputable sites out there. There's Flex Jobs, We Work Remotely, remote.co. You can look locally for city and county jobs and just fact checking anything that you see to the best of your ability. But if it's asking you to commit money or if it's asking you to send off your information and it doesn't tell you the name of the company or something like that, these are just red flags. And we get it because when you're in that situation and you're just like, I want to homeschool so bad and I want to bring my kids home and maybe this is my solution, it can be easy to miss some of the red flags out of enthusiasm. So we totally get that. So just kind of a heads up.
Well, it is. And I mean, even maybe not enthusiasm, in some ways out of desperation,
Desperation.
right?
Mhm.
Like money is tight. Money does not go as far as it used to. I just saw, I think it was Lending Tree that put out the study in the article, which is, Lending Tree. But there was just this new thing that came out about like how many cities in the United States you could be a family of three making $100,000 and you're still thousands of dollars in the hole every month. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Like, so I totally I understand. I've been there. I've definitely looked at, part-time work to make a little bit of extra money to help here or there. And it's hard. It's hard. You're not alone. Just remember there are reputable sites. There are communities and groups that can help you find stuff that's part-time or full-time. It's just a little bit of side hustle things. And yeah, just keep in mind that really looking for the red flags. And if it feels weird, it's not worth it.
Exactly. And then, of course, we would be completely remiss if we didn't touch on a sensitive subject. So, dare I like gently wade into the water of MLMs here, right? I mean, that is kind of like the be all and end all of side hustle money at home. It's kind of the things people lean to. And listen, we know people who are in MLMs. We don't judge. Do not judge. I have a friend who makes a freaking fortune selling shampoo. Like it's ridiculous how much money this woman makes selling shampoo. I'm so happy for her. Like it wouldn't be what I would want to do just because I don't even think I'd be as good at it as she is, if we're being honest, right? But yeah, she's doing great and I'm thrilled for her. That's awesome. So, no judgment, but a lot of times MLMs require you to sell to your friends and kind of use Facebook, leverage Facebook and stuff like that. You usually have to spend money in front. And so, most of the people who are in MLMs aren't making mega bucks off shampoo. That's how pyramids work, right? I mean, it's the top is making great money and then the base, which is a whole lot wider, is not. And it's really hard to not be like, I could do what she's doing. I don't think I could do what my friend is doing. So, okay, thrilled for her. I podcast and make no money. It's all good. Like we've all got our journey in life. Okay.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it's that thing, right? Like, we just want you to be really careful. I'm not going to throw stones because hello,
Yeah.
I do MLM stuff. Anyone who has listened to the podcast for a while will not be too surprised to know that I once did passion parties and I really enjoyed it and them and everything that I learned in the training for it and everything I helped other generally women learn in that process, right? I loved it for a wide variety of reasons. And now I'm technically a brand partner, or I don't know, the terminology for all of the different MLMs changed constantly, but I technically sell Paper Pie Usborne books. I haven't hosted a party in forever. I don't have anyone under me because I don't want to play in that field in that way. I like the discount for myself. I'm happy to let people know when there's a sale or pass on the discount to people and that sort of thing. I'm not looking to make huge amounts of money, but I have friends who do make some good substantial money with it, but they're willing to focus on it in a different way. Or maybe they have an in. I have a friend who's a school teacher and she does book fairs in her town all of the time. But it's complicated, right? It's not as easy as they're going to make it sound because the goal is to sell people to sign up under them because you make a percentage of everything the person sells if they sign up under you. So then it's passive income, which is great. But then, I mean, it's this whole thing. And so just if you decide to wade into it, again, I'm not going to judge, but
Mm.
do not, please, please do not buy stock and inventory. They're going to tell you that's the way to do it. They're going to tell you, and that's how they make their money because the more stuff you buy up front with the plan of selling it to other people, and there'll be lots of reasons and justifications for it. But the vast majority of people who sign up with an MLM end up stuck with a lot of stock and they don't actually get their money back for it. So if you want to sell it, great, sell it. Don't stock up on it and then sell it. That would be my advice.
Head over and watch that documentary series Lula Rich on Amazon Prime before you do anything. Right.
Oh,
It was a train wreck. And what was really interesting was that the lady who started LuLaRoe and her, I think, husband agreed to actually be on it. Usually when there's like an imploded train wreck like that, like
Yeah.
it's like at the end you get that like we reached out, but they declined to comment. Oh no,
Mhm.
these two were like all up in it. They were like, yeah, we'll be happy to take part. My favorite part of the whole thing was they were asking the woman who started it what what she thought women wanted or why she was so successful with women or something like that. It was very specifically a question about like the psychology of women. And she started to answer, and her partner slash husband, whatever he was, I don't know, put his hand on her arm and was like, I've got this. And he answered, and I was like, of course you just did that.
Yeah.
Like that was like the whole thing was just a giant train wreck. It was amazing. I loved every minute of it. So I feel terrible for the people that still have garage fulls of leggings. Trust me. But
Uh,
I loved the docuseries. That was fantastic.
and come on, did you never have a pair of matching leggings with your kiddo? Because I 100%, I 100%. We had like rocket space ones because I'm that cool and my kid's that awesome. So we definitely had matching leggings.
I had a friend who was an operated side hustle to the side hustle who wasn't doing LuLaRoe like officially because the onboarding process for LuLaRoe, by the way, was like insane. Like they went through it and the whole thing, it was bananas the way they had this thing happening. But anyway, I have a friend who never officially did LuLaRoe, but she would figure out what people were after and she would watch these parties all over the world when the people would do the sales. And it was called unicorn hunting, where you would go out
No.
and find them. And then she would flip the leggings and sell them for like 3 times what she got. It was like a whole thing. I couldn't even keep up. I was like, you doing what? No, I mean, she was making money. I'm like, again, she's a stay-at-home mom. I was thrilled for her. I'm like, go make your money, girl. She wasn't hurting anybody. The people wanted the leggings. They were consenting adults paying like $200 for a pair of leggings. Like, more power to you, friend.
I
Yeah,
have tracked down some crazy expensive leggings from around the world. So I do understand that. I do.
I have not, but that is I'm happy for you. If you find some, I'm glad for you. Oh, if I had known you all those years ago when that was like all the rage, I had a hookup for you. You missed it. Oh my gosh, I'm telling you. All right. So that about wraps us up for this week. Before we go, we just want to remind you that we do have our Patreon. Come talk to us. We host a Q&A every month. We have a social if you're just looking for community. We talk about neurodivergence. We talk about curriculum. We talk about like anything you could possibly want to talk about. And our groups are really small and they're really supportive and they're really safe. So there's a whole bunch of different levels over on Patreon, everything from just like, hey, thanks for the podcast, all the way up to full on support and community. And when we say that, you're like, I can't afford full on support and community. That sounds like it's a heck of a lot of money, right? And it's our highest tier is $20 a month, which we get in this crumbling society that we're living in can be a lot. But literally, if you come to just the 4 meetings, it's $5 a meeting. So it's a pretty rocket deal. And we'd love to hang out with you and we'd love to meet you. And we just have an awesome time. Like it's a really sweet group. So there's a link in the show notes. You can find it there. Sometimes there's a coupon code as well. If there is, rock one. If having a coupon code is make or break for you and joining, send us a message. Like we'd rather have you be there and we will absolutely get you a code. Find us on social media. We got you. We've got you covered. So yeah, so it'll be good.
Exactly. Well, and that rolls perfectly into our mantra for the week, right? We like to wrap up our episodes with a mantra. And so this week's mantra is working and homeschooling can go hand in hand, or they might not. Either way, your choices are valid and we support you.
Heck yeah. Whatever you decide to do, go sell those leggings. Whatever you want to do, whatever you're doing, we've got your back. We will cheer you on so loudly.
Yeah.
If it's working for you, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope this has been helpful in some way. I know there were so many like if thens you might be able to, right? But everybody's situation is just so different. But oftentimes there's a way. And if you need help trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel and find that way, we'd be happy to help. So come and chat with us. But we hope you have an awesome day. And if you're already homeschooling, happy homeschooling. If you're not, just have a great day doing whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. Have a great one.